So, have you ever heard of the Pentagon's plan to build a starship? Yeah, I know. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But for a few years, this was a very real project, bankrolled by DARPA, the military's mad science division. And as we're about to find out, this grand mission to the stars, well, it might have been a cover for something much, much closer to home.
Officially, the goal was absolutely breathtaking. I mean, this was the public mission of the 100-year Starship project. The idea was to create the technology and the plan to send people to another star system within a century. It was this huge, inspiring vision, a real-life Starfleet dream, all backed by government dollars.
But you gotta wonder, right? When the same agency that brought us stealth bombers and literally the internet suddenly decides to build an interstellar ark, is that the whole story? Was the Starship the actual point? Or was it just a convenient Trojan horse for a completely different and maybe darker kind of research?
To figure that out, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the project's public origins, which, you'll see, were just strange enough to seem totally harmless.
Okay, so the whole idea kicks off inside DARPA back in 2010. They team up with NASA for a big public conference, and by 2012, they've given a grant to an organization led by the legendary Dr. Mae Jemison, the first black woman to go to space. I mean, on paper, it all looks fantastic, right? A public-private partnership shooting for the stars. What could be more inspiring?
The public face of this thing was a series of annual conferences that were eclectic. That's putting it mildly. You'd have serious astrophysicists talking about engine physics, and in the very next room, you'd have panels with titles like, and I am not making this up, Did Jesus Die for Klingons Too? This whole quirky, almost carnival-like vibe was actually perfect. It was great for grabbing headlines and, as it turns out, even better for distracting people from what was really being discussed.
Because if you actually ignored the Klingon theology for a minute and read the fine print, the official call for research papers, you'd find some truly unsettling topics just hiding there in plain sight. For starters, the conference wasn't just asking how to keep people healthy on a century-long trip. It was asking for papers on the very definition of health itself. Now, that's not a medical question. That's a philosophical one. In a completely closed system, who gets to decide what's normal?
And this is the key. This is a huge deal. It's not about medicine, it's about absolute power. If you're the one designing this closed world and you get to define what healthy thinking and behavior is, well, then you also get to define rebellion or dissent as a psychological illness. It's basically a blueprint for total social engineering.
And then there was this little gem, just casually tucked between sessions on psychology and cryogenics, the single word cybernetics. Human-machine integration. The idea of physically or neurologically modifying the crew to make them more efficient or maybe more compliant for the mission. And it was just presented like it was any other academic topic. No big deal.
This one was even more chillingly blatant. An official topic was the implications of experimentation, which just begs the question, experimentation on who exactly? The crew? What about their children, born generations from Earth? In a metal box with no laws, no courts, and absolutely no way out, who's providing oversight? The silence on that question is absolutely deafening.
But maybe the most shocking item of all, printed right there in an official DARPA and NASA document, was this phrase: on scene, end of journey, spawning from genetic material. Just let that sink in for a second. We are talking about printing human beings at the destination, manufacturing a population from scratch, with no parents, no culture, no history, other than whatever the mission designers decided to program into them.
So while all this creepy social control research was happening out in the open, a parallel story was unfolding in the shadows. It's about the one thing a starship actually needs: an engine. And this is where things get really, really secretive.
So at the very first Starship Symposium, a NASA physicist named Dr. Sonny White announces a potential breakthrough in warp drive physics. Huge headlines, obviously. But then, a few years later, Dr. White leaves NASA. He takes his research private, but he continues to get DARPA funding, all while collaborating with Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, probably the most secretive and legendary R&D group in aerospace history.
And check this out. When a reporter asked if this warp drive research was classified, a DARPA official gave this chillingly precise answer. It was not classified at that moment. That little phrase, that says everything. It basically confirms that a pipeline was built to take this incredible science out of the public domain and walk it straight into the classified world whenever they felt like it.
So now we have two tracks, right? One is developing the science of social control, and the other is developing secret engine technology. The threads really start to tie together when you follow the people and, of course, the money.
The man connecting all these different worlds is a guy named Pete Worden. He was the NASA Center Director who helped DARPA get the 100-year Starship off the ground. Then, almost immediately, he leaves NASA to lead a new private interstellar project called Breakthrough Starshot, which, what do you know, was bankrolled by a Russian tech billionaire. The mission literally just changed hands.
And look, Pete Worden isn't just some NASA bureaucrat. Before all this, he spent nearly 3 decades in the Air Force working on top-secret space programs, including the Star Wars Missile Defense Project back in the 80s. This guy is the ultimate insider. He's the perfect bridge between public science and the military's black budget world. He's basically DARPA's fingerprint on all of this.
And the money for Worden's new project? Well, the Paradise Papers leak revealed that the firm of the billionaire funding Breakthrough Starshot had taken hundreds of millions of dollars from Russian state-controlled giants like Gazprom and VTB Bank. So, the funding for the private sequel to a DARPA project, it leads directly back to the Kremlin.
But here's the punchline to the whole thing. Breakthrough Starshot made this huge splash with its $100 million pledge. They got Stephen Hawking and Mark Zuckerberg on their board, and then the whole thing just fizzled out. It's now on indefinite hold after spending only about $4.5 million. It was a spectacular piece of PR that just conveniently vanished after it served its purpose.
So when you put all these pieces on the table, the disturbing social research, the secret engine tech, the military insiders, the bizarre money trail, the final picture starts to become terrifyingly clear. This was never about a destination. It was about building an architecture of total control.
The 100-year Starship was the perfect cover story. I mean, it's an inspiring, far-off goal that gives you all the political cover you need for research that has immediate, real-world applications for the Department of Defense. The actual product wasn't a ship a century from now, it was the data they were collecting today.
These were the real goals. Number 1, figure out how to design and govern a totally captive human society. Number 2, figure out the logistics of creating a population from scratch. And number 3, create that pipeline to move revolutionary physics out of the public eye and into the classified world.
And this is the main takeaway. The ship was just a hypothetical lab for a very real problem. And that problem is, how do you design a system of total control? The applications aren't just for deep space, you know. Think about nuclear submarines, isolated military bases, underground bunkers. Really any closed environment where you need to manage a population.
You know, if you've ever played the video game Fallout, this whole thing probably sounds eerily familiar. A company builds underground vaults to supposedly save humanity, but is secretly using them as a network of twisted social experiments. It kind of seems like DARPA's 100-year Starship was less about exploring the final frontier and more about exploring the final frontiers of us.